What is an avoidant? And why does loving one feel like trying to build a relationship with someone who keeps emotionally stepping 2 feet away every time you get close? Avoidant attachment isn't cruelty, it isn't coldness, and it isn't a lack of feelings, although from the outside, it can look exactly like that. Avoidance is a protective strategy created by a nervous system that learned, early in life, a very specific rule. Emotions are risky, needs are unsafe, closeness costs more than it gives. For most people, closeness feels calming. For avoidance, closeness activates stress. Their brain doesn't interpret intimacy as comfort, it interprets intimacy as pressure, exposure, and vulnerability. The emotional version of being trapped in a small room with all the lights on, and they don't feel safe there. The childhood blueprint: many avoidants grew up in homes where emotional expression was unwelcome, not always abusive, not always cruel, just unavailable. Caregivers may have been loving but emotionally distant, practical but not nurturing, supportive but uncomfortable with vulnerability. Children in these environments internalize the message: handle it yourself. Do not need anyone. Silence keeps you safe. So they learn a strategy called self-reliance as survival. They suppress emotions not because they don't have them, but because emotions were never rewarded, only disciplined, ignored, or minimized. The child adapts, the adaptation becomes a habit, the habit becomes a personality, and one day that child becomes an adult who says, I'm just not emotional, I don't need anyone, I'm better on my own. That isn't confidence, that's coping, the calm that isn't calm. Avoidants don't feel less, they feel less consciously. Their nervous system reacts, their body activates, but their awareness shuts down. Physiology lights up, emotion disappears from the surface. Outwardly, they appear composed, logical, steady. Internally, they're doing emotional damage control through detachment. Distance quiets the discomfort, so distance becomes the cure. Unfortunately, distance also becomes the problem. The relationship paradox: avoidants want connection. They just fear the cost of it, so they hover near closeness without stepping fully into it. They like companionship, they like affection, they like partnership, but only when it feels light, when it doesn't require vulnerability, when it doesn't threaten autonomy. Once emotions deepen, something inside them whispers, this is dangerous. You're losing control. Pull back before it hurts. And so they do. Not to punish, not to reject, not to harm, but to stabilize themselves. Unfortunately, the partner experiences that stabilization as rejection, abandonment, emotional whiplash. Two nervous systems, two realities, one cycle. The different types of avoidance. Avoidance isn't one behavior. It exists on a spectrum. Some are dismissive avoidant, independent, highly rational, emotion averse. They intellectualize everything because feelings feel volatile. They don't explode, they evaporate. Conversations about emotions feel pointless or uncomfortable, so they minimize, redirect, or disengage. Connection feels like pressure. Pressure feels like danger, so they step back. Others are fearful avoidant. They want closeness intensely and fear it just as intensely. They move toward you seeking intimacy, then panic and withdraw, then return again, like emotional gravity with a faulty orbit. They're not unreliable out of malice. They're torn between longing and terror, two instincts fighting for control. Some thrive in situationships. Ambiguity is home. Labels feel like cages. Relationship without definition? Perfect. Connection without responsibility? Ideal. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because uncertainty feels safer than commitment. Some are romantic minimalists. Low effort affection. Restrained expression. Quiet distance disguised as normalcy. Their partner feels lonely inside the relationship, and that loneliness hurts more than being alone. Then there are the charm and vanish avoidants. The beginning is warm, magnetic, intoxicating. You feel chosen, seen, wanted. Then feelings deepen, expectations emerge, vulnerability approaches, and suddenly silence, confusion, cold air. Not because interest disappeared, but because closeness triggered fear. Once the emotional heat cools, they drift back, as if nothing happened. To them, time paused. To you, time fell apart. The partner's experience: loving an avoidant feels like standing in a room where the floor moves every time you try to plant your feet. Warm one day, distant the next. Open conversation 1 week, silent retreat the next. You start analyzing small signals, tone shifts, delayed responses, sudden disinterest, emotional blanks. You begin shrinking your needs. You become careful, measured, soft, strategic, not to manipulate, but to avoid triggering the retreat. And somewhere in that process, you lose yourself a little. Why they can't just open up. Avoidants don't avoid because they're careless. They avoid because vulnerability activates threat responses in the brain. Their internal experience sounds like, you're going to get trapped. You're going to get rejected. You're going to disappoint someone. They'll expect too much. So they do what has always kept them safe. They shut down. They withdraw. They create distance. And then, once their nervous system calms, they feel normal again, which means they don't fully understand the impact. To them, nothing happened. To their partner, everything did. The shame underneath, avoidants often carry quiet shame. They know something is off. They see the hurt. They sense the disappointment. But emotional confrontation overwhelms their system. So instead of processing it, they minimize conflict, rewrite the narrative, rationalize behavior, shift responsibility to miscommunication, not to deceive, not to manipulate, but because self-protection outruns self-reflection. Acknowledging harm requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is the very thing they're wired to avoid. So the cycle repeats. The cost to the avoidant. And avoidants don't escape pain, they delay it. They experience chronic emotional isolation, limited intimacy, depth, unresolved grief and sadness, internal numbness instead of peace. They may look strong and composed, but internally they live in a quiet drought. Relationships remain shallow or unstable. Closeness never fully lands. Love never fully roots. And somewhere inside, they feel alone, even when they're not. The cost to the partners begin questioning themselves. Am I too sensitive? Am I needy? Is this my fault? No, you are responding normally to inconsistent intimacy. Your brain isn't malfunctioning, it's reacting to intermittent reinforcement. Moments of closeness become powerful reward signals. Your nervous system chases the connection, hoping to reach the version of them that felt present. You're not addicted to the person, you're addicted to the rare emotional availability, and that's what keeps people stuck. Avoidant versus anxious. Opposite coping strategies. The anxious partner moves toward connection to feel safe. The avoidant partner moves away from connection to feel safe. Both respond to fear, just in opposite directions. Neither is broken, both are wounded. One fears abandonment, one fears engulfment. Together, they reenact their childhood emotional blueprints with adult consequences. Can avoidance change? Yes, but not by accident. Avoidant healing requires awareness instead of denial. Staying present during discomfort, tolerating vulnerability, gradually learning emotional vocabulary, developing secure relational habits. It means staying in the room when you want to leave, letting honesty exist without shutting it down, letting closeness feel awkward without running from it. It is not about losing independence, it's about no longer needing distance to feel safe. Healing for partners, healing also means recognizing your needs are not excessive. Your desire for emotional presence is not unreasonable. Connection is a human requirement, not a flaw. Sometimes healing means staying and growing together. Sometimes healing means leaving. When growth isn't possible, both are valid. Your worth is not measured by how hard you try to earn someone else's capacity. The truth beneath all is that all avoidants are not heartless. They are overwhelmed survivors of emotional environments that rewarded distance. They are cautious where others are open, guarded where others are expressive, self-contained where others are relational, and even if they don't say it out loud, they feel deeply, just quietly, internally, and alone. Avoidance keeps them safe, until one day it keeps them separate, and distance becomes the cage they never meant to build. Healing begins when closeness stops feeling like danger and finally starts to feel like home.